My guest at this time is a veteran WWE superstar. He's now a free agent. You may have known him from WWE TV as Arturo Ruas, but he's joining me now, Adrian Jaoude. Adrian, thank you very much for taking the time to chat with me here today.
Thank you for letting me to have the opportunity to talk to you, and it's a pleasure.
Yeah. So, you say here the new name. So a lot of people do know you as Ruas, Arturo. Is this your real name? Like, is this a name you came up with? What is this name that you're going under?
Yes, it's my real name. It's like my name I used to wrestle with on amateur wrestling and jiu-jitsu and all my background stuff. And now it's a perfect timing to use again this name. It's my name, and I kind of made a lot from this name. I'm very proud of it.
Yeah.
And I played the role as Arturo Ruas, as everybody know, and now it's time to keep moving forward, right? So Adrian Jaoude for now, and for now, let's see what's going to be next.
Okay, well, and that's the thing is I want to talk a little bit about you, Adrian, because man, you have such a everybody I've talked to about you. I have some friends that were down in the performance center. I've heard that you and I are both friends with Sean X-Pac Waltman,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
And
so he's my mentor. X-Pac is the guy I always, as we say, I always put him over, and I always will, because he's one of the guys that changed my career when I met him first. And I always loved his style, always was a fan of him and how he wrestled and how he did all this, his legacy. And and that was one of the biggest thing that I had the opportunity to have inside WWE, inside that this career that I ran. And X-Pac is one of them. It's like it was a gift for me, and I could always suck his brain. I always like got him. They have 5 minutes, and never was just 5 minutes. And I was like just learning from him a lot, and he's like a wonderful person, and I'm just thankful to have him on my career.
was it because Sean worked a style that you feel like it was something you wanted to do? Because Sean used a lot of kicks. Obviously he did some high flying too, but really was really good on the mat as well. Is it just because you liked Sean's style that it really meant so much to get advice from him?
Yes, exactly. Because while I was like trying to figure out how I will be and how I can be like unique and different, he was one of the guys that I studied a lot, and
Yeah.
kicking and doing the high flying style. But his kicks was always on point and always there, And when you see something happening and something good, especially, that is like not it's like years training, and I know what this training is like. You have to train your kicks over and over and over, and even though sometimes you will miss them, you can miss like a head, you can miss like a leg. That's why you have to keep training. And when I was watching at the beginning, that was like almost 6 years ago, Sean X-Pac, and I knew that guy was good. Like, and I knew that when I will meet him, I have to kind of learn from him something. And luckily, I had the opportunity. He went by there, produced some matches for me, and helped me a lot. And since then, we became friends, and amazing.
Well, I know he's a big fan of yours. And he told me explicitly that you are not somebody that he would mess with. You are a legitimate badass, Adrian, is what I'm
Yes.
getting at here. You have represented Brazil at the 2011 Pan Am Games or Pan American Games. And I read that you are unbeaten in freestyle wrestling in Brazil and have been for 17 years.
Yes, exactly. So that that sounds crazy, right? But that's true, man. Like 17 years, and me and my family, the Jaoude family, right? So I have my brothers, and we build a name in Brazil, and all my brothers. So we are 5 brothers, and we all wrestled, and even like freestyle wrestling. I was freestyle wrestling. My brothers were like, some of them were Greco-Roman, and my older brother was freestyle. We played both, but we always competed on freestyle, and that started to make us bring medals and make history from Brazil. I was the first one getting like a silver medal in an international like a high level competition called Dunkolov in Bulgaria,
Okay.
and there was like a first silver medal on South America. So like I broke that record. My brother also he made the Olympic Games in 2004, being like the first Brazilian after 50 years with no Brazilians in wrestling over like 50 years, and like we start to build that story. And it's funny, like everything like led me to WWE, and it's like when I look backwards, I was like, yeah, man, I did a lot. And while I was doing the amateur wrestling, the freestyle, I started to do jiu-jitsu and capoeira and luta livre esportiva. And my main goal always was the Olympic Games. That was my biggest dream. And while I was teaching some gyms and training amateur wrestling, I was in Marco Ruas' team. So like my coach on amateur wrestling used to teach inside Marco Ruas' school,
Okay.
and I started to train Muay Thai with Marco Ruas, and that was I was a kid, right? I was like 12 years old, and like I started to do Muay Thai, MMA, and in that time was Vale Tudo, even wasn't like MMA, and you know, and never stopped. And I fell in love with amateur wrestling. I fell in love with MMA, and I always used to say because like I am in that time when I used to watch Jean-Claude Van Damme,
Okay.
right?
All
And
right.
like the committee and my best like for fun, we used to go to the street. Okay, let's fight, and we used to fight for fun, like you know. And that's it. And that's my story. Like when people ask me, "Hey, what you do for a living?" And I look at them, I go, "Hey, like, are you sure? Do you want me to answer this question?" And yeah, please. Yeah, I kick people's heads just for fun.
Wow. So, Adrian, you've talked a lot about your legitimate background here, and obviously you achieved a lot, right? You and your
Yes.
family.
Yeah.
But were you always a pro wrestling fan? Like, when did WWE kind of get into the mix in pro wrestling?
Yeah, funny that we always loved pro wrestling, and me and my brothers we used to play. We used to call is like punching the air. So we used to go to the beach and mimic the pro wrestling matches, punching the air. So like we never hit each other,
Okay.
and that was so fun for us. And like you used to do the moves and kind of we knew what we were like doing, but we called our game as punching the air because we used to kind of fake that we were like punching each other and like bumping and taking bumps and whatever. And that's all like that was around 90s, and when we just moved to Brazil, because I was born in Lebanon, moved to Brazil when I was kid and 89.
Okay.
And in Brazil we had a better life and we start to kind of enjoy life and go to the beach and all this stuff, and we start to play around. And we had that moment. We used to watch wrestling on TV. I can't remember exactly like big matches, but I remember that we used to watch wrestling on TV. And kind of I started to do the amateur wrestling, the martial arts, and that pro wrestling part kind of stopped a little bit. And in 2014 came Rigo, Mr. Rigo came the WWE personnel to see if they can find people in Brazil.
Okay. Was this
So
just
kind
like
of
open tryout kind of thing, or
yeah, kind of open trial to see if they can find something. And my brother called me, say, "Hey, I just got a call here from like a friend of ours, and he's like asking me if I know someone to go there." And I was like, "All right, sounds good. Let me try." So I was training for the Olympic Games 2016 in Rio de Janeiro, and I was like, you know, almost in that high level point where like about to compete.
wow?
And I said, I told my brother, like, I will go and then I will try, but my goal is Olympic Games, you know that. And he was like, no, just go there and see what you can do, whatever.
Yeah.
And that happened. So I came there. I did like the application. I met Mr. Rigo, and that's it. And I did like a promo, and happened. And that was like when the game changed, right? So like I was, oh my God, like tomorrow I'm going to be going to Orlando, living there. Was funny, man, because I did the interview 2014 and they kind of gave me the answer. And I was trying kind of not tell my wife about that in that time because I was worried and she was working that time. And I came to her after I had actually I went to the performance center. I did the tryout. I made it, and
Okay.
I came home. So I said, "Hey, honey, like I have news." And she was like, "Okay, what is that?" And I said, "How about if we live in Orlando?" And then she was like, "Doing what?" So let me show you. So I went to YouTube and I put some videos and like people like doing like frog splash and 360s and she was like, "Oh my God, are you going to do that?" I said, "Yes." And then she went and said, "Soon, like, are we going to? How about if we move to Orlando?" She was like, "Awesome, let's do it. Let's change our life." But I have news too. And I was like, "What is that?" "I am pregnant." And I was like,
Wow.
wow. And that's it. And like everything came together. Like moving to Orlando, my son born 2 weeks after I moved to Orlando. And my life changed. My life changed big time. Like it was crazy. Boom, it changed.
So how do you, real quickly before we move on, like how do you feel about how the fact you didn't keep going towards the Olympics and you signed with WWE instead of pursuing what sounds like your top dream there?
Yeah. So what is that's kind of a so in Brazil we were having how can I explain that like in Brazil the sport managers in general, even for wrestling that time, they wasn't being able to kind of like feed the sport with sponsors and money and I wasn't training as I should be training and everything else. And I felt that okay, I will run Olympic Games and I could win or not, but what next? And I had some plans in my head, but I was feeling inside myself I needed something bigger than just retire.
Sure.
And that's why when WWE came in, I just felt it's something like a God's plan. I always say it's a God's plan. God knows everything. And I was like already asking myself, and even in that time I was training the Nogueira brothers from UFC,
Wow.
Rodrigo and Rogerio.
Damn.
And we were talking about to go to UFC after the Olympic Games. And I was like, hey guys, do you think that you can bring me some contract, whatever? Because I was training them. And they start to tell me, yes, let's see it. If you really want it, we can make it happen. Let's see it. And when WWE came in, and I am a big fan of wrestling, right? And
Right.
everything if you tell me wrestling, I am in. Like, okay, let's wrestle in the grass. I am there wrestling in the grass. Like
Sure.
backyard wrestling, I am there. And I don't know, I just felt it that WWE kind of hit it more in my heart. And like, I love UFC. I trained MMA. I did MMA in the beginning. I trained many guys, but I kind of just felt my heart beating more for pro wrestling, right?
Yeah.
And came the opportunity. And when I moved to Orlando, I kept training for the Olympic Games, and I kept in my mind that I should go and train. I did the tryouts because in that time you had to do all the tryouts. So you had to because the Olympic Games was being in Brazil,
Okay.
so all the spots, all the weight classes were already kind of filled. So
Mm.
my weight class, other guys, other girls also, because of being in Brazil. And the only thing we had to do was to run the tryouts and be there competing. But kind of on the last tryout, they kind of changed the rule and that wasn't being applied. You had to win at least two tryouts. And in that time, I was already in WWE. I was already training here. And I went, actually, in that time, I went to Paris, Ukraine. I kind of did like the circuit. And in the end, kind of didn't happen, the Olympic Games. And I was like, no big deal. I have something bigger in my head. Not bigger like big enough to be kind of feeling proud of myself that I did something big. And that's the journey. That's everything. How it happened. It's funny, man.
So wait,
That's why I love interviews, because you start to go inside your head.
yeah, I'm kind of interested. So wait, if like was WWE open to you doing the Olympics? Like,
No, yeah, no, that was kind of part of my deal with it.
really?
Coming in. So they knew about my situation and they allowed me to compete. So
Wow.
I was in Performance Center in 2015. No, 2015 October I came, and 2016 in January was the circuit. So
Right.
I had to go to Brazil to win the trials in Brazil. So I won the trials in Brazil and I qualified to be 100% an Olympic wrestling Brazilian team. So when I won the trials in Brazil, so we went to Paris, Ukraine, and Turkey. And
Yeah.
so I had to kind of compete all the circuit, and I did it. And WWE were like just waiting me to be there, and everything changed and didn't happen. And the Olympic Games went down, and I didn't run the Olympic Games, but you
Okay.
know.
So you wind up back at the Performance Center. So talk to me about what it was like to be at the Performance Center for you. You've spent your whole life training to be a combat artist, mixed martial artist, all these different forms. How was training to be a pro wrestler? Was it what you expected? Was it very different than what you expected?
Yeah, first of all, like in that time, I wasn't speaking English at all. So like,
Right. I heard that from people that were there. Was that a
yeah,
huge was
and
that a
I was trying to figure out what was happening. So we had the ropes, and in Brazil, I used to kind of train boxing, but it's different, right? So like boxing rings is different than a wrestling ring, and I was, of course, like taking bumps and wrist locks and like hip tosses and trying to understand how the things on the Brookside class and after was Norman class. And always very excited to be there, to know that I was in the biggest company ever and whatever. And I was like in that process of trying to know it was real, it wasn't real, what was that, and everything was starting to get like smooth after like I think 6 months when I started to understand and I start to understand the structure of a match and how a match play. And like we have like a baby face, we have a heel, and with all those coaches there. And I always say that to be there, you learn a lot. It's like you are surrounded by people who lived and who live the business 100%. So like their lives is the business, and they wrestled before, they did a career, they retired, and now they are coaches. And but they imagine they have a lot to share, like their matches, the biggest moments, and be there, learning from there was like for me as a shooter, as a legit fighter,
yeah.
was a game changer because that allowed me to become a pro wrestler, right? So
Right.
I am very lucky and very thankful to be in that way. So like I wasn't born here in USA, so here in USA the culture of pro wrestling it's live. So like now my son Lorenzo, he comes to me and he say, "Daddy, let's do a wrestling match." But
Yeah.
he does like gimmick wise. He goes like wrestling match, and every time we play, he picks a character. So sometimes he's a dinosaur, sometimes he's like something like, and in his head, and his head's a very pro wrestling. But in my head, before WWE wasn't like that because in Brazil we had a time when we had pro wrestling on TV,
Right.
and we had like a group of Brazilian wrestlers. They did pro wrestling on TV, but it was just one group. And when they retired all at the same time, and
Mm.
pro wrestling kind of died in Brazil.
Um,
And we came after we kind of bringing this pro wrestling now to Brazil again. And it's funny because my head now thinks pro wrestling, and here like funny man like was month not month like years ago I was like in visiting a town nearby here Sanford or something, was like an event, was like a fair or something. It was like a ring in the street.
Yeah.
And like I was like, oh my God, like look at this. And I stayed all night watching that show, like, and my wife, are you serious? You're watching like this here? I said, yes, for sure. I want to watch this here. It was like, was so fun. And I was telling my wife, you see, like all these kids here, one day they will become maybe pro wrestlers.
Yeah.
Like, and I was like wishing this to be happening in Brazil too, because it's a great sport. It's an amazing sport. I don't know. I fell in love with pro wrestling. So
And you talk. I mean, it's hard not to when you're down there at that performance center. You talk about all the coaches, but back to the link because you speak Portuguese, right, from
I
Brazil.
speak Portuguese, Spanish, Arabic, and English.
Wow. All right.
Yeah.
That's impressive. So when you're there and you're trying to those first 6 months learn, is there a translator for you?
Nothing. So
Real?
like in that time I had like friends, Cesar Bononi, and he was like kind of speaking little more than me. And of course we helping each other all the time to make this happening. And even me and Cesar kind of we came in together to performance center. And it's funny that my older brother he made the tryout also, Antoine,
Okay.
but he asked more time to make the Olympic Games because he wasn't in the team. And it's funny, like we all, so me, my brother, and Caesar, we made the trial together, and we signed with WWE. And it was hard, man. Like no speaking English, trying to understand what was happening, coaches teaching, you kind of trying to understand, and like there, everything runs so fast. People doing promos and like knowing and I was like, okay, what I do, how I do a promo, like I talk in Portuguese, I talk in Arabic, and like what the heck? And like always when I used to cut a promo in Portuguese, I used to feel that I was getting behind, right? Like everybody speaking English, and I was like getting behind, like funny.
Well,
But
yeah. Yeah, well, I was just gonna say because Andrade has talked about that, where he thought that the fact that he wasn't able to speak fluent English was like a big barrier for him there, in order
it
to kind of
is,
break through and get to the next level. Didn't mean to
it
cut you off.
is, it is like it is a barrier because sometimes you want to express yourself by trying to express your emotion. Like let's say you had a match, wasn't so good, you go try to explain what happened. And it's funny because Spanish and Portuguese is kind of opposite than English. So like we sometimes we think opposite than in English. And when you talk, when you try to translate this in your head, you say opposite. Like I have no example now, but when
Okay.
you say something, people go, wait a minute, what you saying? Like, and you try to explain and over and when you see yourself sometimes you're like in a mess and take a while to make people understand what was you were trying to do and but it wasn't so bad like because I started to pick it up fast. My brothers used to speak English and I think because of other languages and wasn't so bad but it was hard at the beginning at the first months. Putting together, like putting a match together was like, was
Yeah.
hard.